Welcome to Momentum for Change, Voices of the Missouri Movement. This is a monthly podcast produced by your coalition, and I am your host, Nora Mosby, a member services specialist at the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We hope that you enjoy this conversation coming to you directly from Voices of the Missouri Movement. Some episodes of Momentum for Change have conversations that include content and descriptions of domestic and sexual violence, which may be alarming or activating for some listeners. Please take care and visit the MOCADSV website or call our office to connect with supportive services. Welcome to episode 9 of season 3 of Momentum for Change. This is your host, Nora Mosby, and Momentum for Change is a podcast brought to you by the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence to lift up voices of the Missouri movement. I am really looking forward to today's episode. We are joined by 3 legends of the Missouri movement, if I don't say so myself. These 3 guests we have today are going to be presenting at the MOCADSV Conference coming up in Columbia, Missouri on November 6th, 7th, and 8th. And they just bring a wealth of experience, expertise, and wisdom to everything they do, including the MOCADSV Conference. So I really appreciate you all joining the conference, presenting about these very innovative, compelling topics that I can't wait to get into with our episode today. And I just thank you all so much for your time on our podcast today. So as we're getting started, I'd love to turn it over to you all. And if you don't mind introducing yourselves and letting our guests know a little bit about what you do in the advocacy movement here in Missouri. So Jessica, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Nora. My name is Jessica Hill, and I'm the Executive Director of the Safe House of Southeast Missouri in Cape Girardeau. And we serve a 5-county area in Southeast Missouri with residential and non-residential services for domestic and sexual violence.
Wonderful to have you here, Jessica. Emily, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. My name is Emily Stoinski. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Education Coordinator at an organization called Safe Connections in St. Louis, Missouri. That title means I get to engage in prevention and response education for individuals 18 and up, ranging on a variety of topics from healthy relationships to consent to rejection to how to support survivors. So I have a background working directly with survivors, and so it's exciting to be on the prevention and response education side of it.
I'll say. Great to have you here, Emily. Andrea, would you like to go next?
Yes. Hi, my name is Andrea Raya, and I'm the Director of Community Programs at Rosebrook Center. And our mission is to break the cycle of domestic violence so individuals and families can live free of abuse. And as the Director of Community Programs, my team uses trauma-informed practices to support and empower survivors through education, advocacy, systems change, and abuser accountability. And we do this through the criminal and civil justice system and through health advocacy within the Kansas City metropolitan area.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here, Andrea. So you all are very busy in your local communities. You have very full schedules with all of these fantastic services and points of advocacy that you just discussed. But you're also very involved at the statewide level. Jessica, you serve on our executive board, and then all 3 of you also serve on committees of our executive board. So Jessica, we've had the honor and privilege of following your leadership at the Public Policy Committee for the last number of years. Emily and Andrea, you all serve on our membership committee. Andrea, you co-chair that committee. I could keep going on and on. Emily and Andrea, you are both regional liaisons. So it's pretty astounding the commitment you have to state level advocacy. So you're doing all this stuff in your local community, but you're also doing all of the stuff at the statewide level. So I just have to wonder, where does your passion for state level work come? Why are you all willing to spend so much time? And thank you for your service to the coalition. It's much appreciated. But could you speak to your state level involvement too? Whoever would like to go first. No reason to be shy on this podcast.
I was like, I can go first. So yeah, I've enjoyed my time as one of the co-chairs on the membership committee, and really have gotten to learn more about the movement on that state level. By study, I am a social worker, and so throughout education, they always talked about there's that micro, meso, and macro approach, and I truly believe we cannot address the movement without addressing all three through advocacy change in all three of the levels. So we are, I have a team that's doing the direct advocacy in the community, and then we have community partnerships within our Kansas City region, and then working on the coalition and through advocacy at the state and national level. Team members at Rosebrooks are advocating for survivors at everywhere.
Thanks for speaking to that, those different levels of impact, Andrea. I couldn't agree with you more. I think to have such a effective response, we really do have to address all three levels, and we certainly appreciate you all taking action at the statewide level. Emily, would you like to go next?
I would love to. When I think about, why I'm connected to the coalition, why I think it's so important, is that I kind of see our roles as regional liaisons and folks that are involved in the coalition as kind of being that bridge between what is happening boots on the ground with, advocates that are running our frontline crisis lines that are working in shelter, and the policies, procedures, and even best practices that are happening at a larger level. So I'll give an example, kind of this bridge. I remember a handful of years ago working with survivors that were navigating trying to get out of a lease, and they had experienced violence and they needed to move. And I remember distinctly receiving notification that the coalition had been a part of passing legislation allowing for survivors of domestic violence to break their lease. And to me, that was that really very real example of something that's happening at this larger state level is going to now have a direct connection to the work that I am doing in the survivors in my community. And so to me, it is, I'm somebody that's very privileged to have the space to be able to be that bridge. And so I see that as being able to really help inform what are the needs in our community by participating at the state level with the coalition.
You all are filling my cup, making me so happy right now. I couldn't agree more, Emily. I think that everything we do impacts survivors' lives, and we can do that at multiple levels. And the work that you're doing at the statewide level makes such a big difference on survivors' lives. So thanks for mentioning that. Jessica, would you like to go next?
Yes. So you mentioned that one of the ways that I'm involved at the state level is with our Public Policy Committee. I did previously serve as a regional liaison, a member of the membership committee, and chair of the membership committee. And I did those things early on in my tenure as an executive director. And the learning that took place as being part of that committee, I would always be coming back to my coworkers and saying, I learned all of this at the membership meeting today, or I learned all this at the regional meeting today. And we appreciated that so much. And I think that the leadership that we are providing now is a way of giving back to the coalition for all of the amazing things that they've given us in terms of training and technical assistance and advocacy. And I have a real passion for public policy, and have, way back many years ago, I was an intern in the Capitol in Jefferson City. And so to get the opportunity to go back there now in my role and to work with our legislators and educating them not only about what the Safe House does, but about what as a coalition we're doing and the impact that we're having statewide on domestic violence is just a really incredible opportunity. And to see, back over the past 10 years that I've been with the Safe House, all of the things that have been accomplished in the public policy realm, especially at the statewide level. And then we've had some huge wins at the national level. With the VOCA fix and things like that. And so just, to play a tiny part in that is such a gift. And I look forward to it every year when the session's getting ready to gear up again, and being able to have influence and see what, issues that are affecting our clients every day that then we can take to the legislature and say, look, this is happening to your constituents. You can act to end this or to impact this. And sometimes we see the light turns on for them, and they see that, this is something they can make a change on and carry that out. So it's a really wonderful opportunity.
Yes, truly. And we really can learn so much from one another. I'm always trying to sneak an invitation to membership committee meetings, and I try to go to all the regional meetings I can, just because I do learn so much and just enjoy them. And I'm so inspired by them as well. So Missouri is a very regional state with distinct personalities in each of our regions. And this conversation that we're having today is, in fact, representative of the diversity that occurs within those regions. And so, Jessica, you're from Southeast Missouri. Emily, you're from St. Louis. And Andrea, you are from Kansas City. Can you speak to kind of the personality of the local advocacy movement in your region and anything that you're really excited about that's happening in your region? Andrea, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I would say in Kansas City, we have a collaborative approach to advocacy. We have 4 other domestic violence agencies in addition to Rosebrook Center, and with among those 4, we still don't have enough resources or services to serve our survivors, and so we honor our community partnerships because it really does take a community. And so not only partnering with domestic violence agencies, but also the local law enforcement, KCPD, other organizations such as like Maddie Rhodes, or I'm just trying to think as well, like Order of Protection, POU, court systems, because it takes really all of us to support one another to bring awareness of gaps and how to best serve survivors within our entities. And every single community partner meeting that I've been a part of or been to, everyone has that same mindset of how do we help, how do we improve our services, our policies, our procedures, and navigate those challenges and barriers to keep survivors safe and get them connected to resources and services, because it truly does take a whole community, because one shelter may be providing emergency shelter and the other one could be doing the court advocacy or assisting with that law enforcement process. And so bits and pieces, if we collaboration is one of the main keys I see within Kansas City.
Absolutely. And I have long been inspired by the collaborative efforts of the advocacy organizations in Kansas City. You all are in a really unique position because you have such large agencies that are providing so many different services under one roof, and yet you are still looking and continuing to find opportunities to collaborate with one another. So hats off to you, Andrea. That's great to hear about. For people who aren't maybe familiar with the advocacy services throughout the state of Missouri, St. Louis is actually pretty different in the way that they're formatted and structured. Can you talk a little bit about that, Emily, and what's going on in St. Louis?
Absolutely. St. Louis is always, I mean, I'm sure many larger cities can say, and Kansas City probably can say the same thing, in that, just providing advocacy in a large geographic area can be really unique, and that different, even within a larger geographic area, different sections of it may require different needs or different approaches to services. I definitely echo what was stated around just seeing higher levels of collaboration, I think, more than ever before. I really attribute, I don't know, I keep thinking how lucky we are to be providing advocacy at this moment in time because of the work of so many advocates that for decades was just even trying to bring awareness to these issues. And I think we are now, well, at least we're seeing in St. Louis, is the fruits of all of those efforts. So it's not just domestic and sexual violence organizations talking about these issues. We're seeing, churches and religious spaces, performing arts spaces, mental health providers, all of these folks that are really engaged and really intentional about survivor support. So we're at a kind of this cool crossroad of, it's not just kind of us that are at the table having these conversations in St. Louis.
Yeah, and I appreciate so much you talking about how we're lucky to be benefiting from the work that advocates and organizations before us, because that's so true. Jessica, what's going on in Southeast? How would you talk about Southeast?
Well, I think it's, obviously we're working in a more decentralized, is how I would describe it, region in Southeast Missouri. But the partnerships here are just incredibly strong, even though there are more miles between our facilities. I've been really impressed with the work of the programs in Poplar Bluff and in Perryville and in East Prairie and, the other communities in our region. And, one thing is that we really do have to work together if we, for some reason, like if our shelters are full, we're calling each other. If an victim's not safe in our community and needs to move to a different community, we can relocate them and know that the quality of service is going to be just as high in their agency as it is here. And I think that we have done a really great job of trying to mentor within our region, because we do have some newer executive directors. So for instance, the Regional Family Crisis Center in Perryville has a very new executive director. She came and she's visited us twice, once in our shelter, once in our outreach office, to learn more about what we do and just share ideas and resources and policies and forms and everything, And the new director in Poplar Bluff at Haven House had never been to Capital Advocacy Days last year. And so she and her assistant director were able to go with us, and they shadowed us for a couple of visits and then felt confident to go and do the rest of theirs on their own. But, I think that it was just extremely collaborative here in Southeast Missouri. It looks different and we don't see each other quite as often, but there's a lot of mutual respect and a lot of mutual resource sharing here. And it's a great region to work within.
Yeah, it truly is. I am so inspired every time I get to talk with you all in Southeast and hear about all the new things that are going on. And I have to say, shout out to you, Jessica, because you do an incredible job mentoring other organizations and executive directors. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it's something that I really feel strongly about. And so actually the director of a safe place in Jefferson County is coming next week to do a visit with us as well. So I'm always extending invitations. We'd love for people to come and spend the day with us. And literally, our operation in those terms is an open book. And so, I really do enjoy being able to help people if I can.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a special thing about the movement here in Missouri. So we're here today to talk about the biannual statewide conference hosted by the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. For anyone who's never heard of the conference before, if you have staff or coworkers who've never heard of it, how would one of you all describe what the conference is and what it's all about? Someone's like, what is that?
I'll say that I definitely look forward to the conference, every other year, just to see the number of people who are working in the movement in our state. I think is really eye-opening, and I find it very encouraging that there are so many people who are passionate about ending domestic violence in our state, and also to see how many really neat, innovative, good things are happening around our state, and that people, like we've been talking about, are so willing to share of their knowledge and their resources, and not only from other shelters, but then the coalition is so great about bringing in folks from state departments or from other types of agencies who have knowledge that we could benefit from. I think that the offerings and the programs are so diverse. And it's always hard to choose, in a particular time slot, which session you'll go to, which is why you need to bring more than one person so you guys can split up. And there are so many things that we have taken away and implemented in our own agency. The one that comes to mind right off the bat is our text line. We came to the conference a few years ago and learned about it from the Branson shelter and brought it immediately back to Cape. And basically we just did exactly what they did. And it's been amazing. And, if we hadn't been there, who knows when we would have developed that program. But because we're at the conference and we saw their presentation on it, we immediately jumped on it.
Yeah, that's such a good example, Jessica. Thanks for sharing that. So the three of you all have been to conference before, but you've also presented at conference before. So you have contributed a lot to conference in the past and will continue to do so in 2024. But as you think back over past conferences that you've been to, are there previous keynotes that really stand out in your memory? Previous sessions? I mean, Jessica, you talked about the text line, which was great. I remember at the last conference, Jessica, you and Kim Dixon presented about building your new shelter. And it was so inspiring and exciting to hear about that process. But as you all, and Emily, you presented on providing services to LGBTQ survivors of violence. But as you think back on past conferences, is there anything that really stands out to you as being very inspiring or meaningful?
I think about one in particular session the last time I was there, and it was talking about reproductive health care specific for survivors. And this was 2 years ago. And so we have a very unique landscape in Missouri. And I just remember being in that session and just learning about the incredible high levels of support available to advocates, and how to navigate working with survivors that maybe are, for example, looking for birth control, and to kind of talk through what are those different options, tangible tools that we could literally take right back to our organizations and use. And so I think it's cool, especially in conferences where you have topics that are so relevant, and it's not just I'm the advocate maybe at my computer watching a webinar on this topic. It's, I get to engage with multiple of my peers on a topic that we're all very interested in learning more about.
Absolutely. I remember that presentation by the Missouri Family Health Council. I thought it was super helpful as well.
I know I will admit that I have not been to a conference, and so I've been in a leadership role since 2014. And whenever the opportunity came up, I encouraged my advocates to attend the conference because I knew it'd be very impactful. This work can be very hard and very isolating. And so to be multiple days in a room with people who know the work, and to have that support, that camaraderie across the state. And so I am looking forward to my first one.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad, Andrea. I didn't realize you hadn't come before, and I'm just so excited that after 10 years, a decade of advocacy, you'll be joining us at the conference. So that's great to hear. So for maybe advocates that this is their first time coming, do you have any insight or tips about how to get the most out of conference when you do attend? For anyone who hasn't been before?
Absolutely. The first initial thought that comes to my head is, if you are an introvert, find the extrovert within yourself, or if you are an extrovert, turn it on. Even more so, introduce yourself to advocates from around the state. Because, even though I think even in our own communities, we have such tight-knit bonds, I think there's something that is so beautiful about connecting with folks in different areas. Even if our services or our needs may look a little bit different, I think there's a lot of creative problem solving, and a lot of amazing support that can happen when you connect with advocates from across the state. So my huge advice is put yourself out there. Go up and introduce yourself to someone. Folks are going to be extremely friendly, and you never know that connection that you may build with that person.
Yeah, and these are not strangers. These are people that go to work each and every day and care passionately about the same issues that brought you to the conference. And so I think that's helpful to keep in mind, is that this is unusual work, but it's really helpful to be able to talk to other people who are doing it as well and connect around that. Jessica, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say, obviously go to every session and do take time amongst your group, if you're there with, others from your agency, to look at the agenda and divide up, the session so you can get the most possible. Sometimes I think sessions are repeated, and so sometimes you have the option, to check it out another time. But the other thing is, there's an app called Whova that the conference has used in the past, and it's really helpful for keeping track of your agenda, and there's just lots of resources there. So definitely take advantage of the Whova app. And then there are some social opportunities. And so there I would agree with Emily, like those are your opportunities to really sit with different people during the meal times, and go to the mixer, or go into the to the exhibit space, and just really take advantage of everything that's offered, because there are a lot of opportunities within the sessions, and then also outside of them, so you have a really full conference experience.
Yeah, that's such good advice, Jessica. There are plenty of opportunities to share food together. Nobody leaves the conference hungry. There are snacks, there are meals, there are more snacks. I did mention the omelet bar. So yeah, definitely think about sharing a meal with a newer person that you haven't met already. So the theme of the conference this year is unity. And that was a theme that meant a lot to the coalition staff based on where the Missouri movement is right now. And I can tell just by how you've described the work in your local communities and at the statewide level that unity means a lot to you all. You've talked about working together and collaboration. So can you all speak to the theme of unity and share any thoughts you have in addition to what you've already shared about what unity means to you in your advocacy work? Do you love it? Do you hate it? What do you think of the theme?
I like the theme because unity is imperative in our movement. We can't resolve domestic violence, intimate partner violence, without addressing sexism in the world. We can't address sexism without addressing heterosexism or classism and racism. And so all these forms of oppression are systematically woven together, and unity is critical to collaborate within our own communities, but also across the state to be aligned with, what is our steps? What are you working on? What can we bring back to one another, to lift up one another, to support survivors? So I think it's very fitting and definitely necessary.
That's such a great insight, Andrea. It really speaks to the intersectional nature that our work must take on to truly be effective. So I did want to give our listeners a sneak peek to the workshops that you all will be providing, because there are some just fantastic topics that you're covering. Emily, I wanted to start with you. You are presenting a workshop about supporting LGBTQI survivors of violence. Can you talk about that workshop and what listeners can look forward to if they choose to attend the conference and attend your workshop?
Absolutely. I'm going to try and keep this very brief because I'm very excited for us to have this conversation. I fully believe that our movement is so full of folks that really want to provide intentional, responsive support to our LGBTQ plus survivors of domestic and relationship violence, and that also lack the tools or information or feel really stuck. And so this session is really an opportunity for anyone and everyone to get that kind of basic 101 information. So we talk about acronyms. Yes, we are going to talk about pronouns, but we're also going to really talk about why it's important. We talk a lot in our fields about how can we be responsive to folks with different identities or different experiences. And so we'll specifically talk about why it's important for us in Missouri to really have honest conversation around what are the experiences of just queer individuals in general in our state, and how can we incorporate that awareness and care intentionally into our services for survivors.
Can't wait. I'm looking forward to that, Emily. Andrea, you just spoke about the critical role that anti-racism work plays in domestic and sexual violence advocacy, and you're going to be presenting a workshop called Breaking Free from Features of White Supremacy. I'm really looking forward to this. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that workshop?
Yes. So back in, I think, 2021, Rosebrook Center adopted and focused on the features of white supremacy, which is a tool developed by Dismantling Racism Works. Last year in 2023, I participated in a leadership program, LEAP, a Valor US project. So it stands for Leadership, Education, and Advancements for Professionals. And the program was very intensive, interactive training and practicum for leaders of color in the anti-violence movement. Throughout my advocacy career, I always wondered, what keeps us resilient? What sustains us? What's the advocate journey? What's the lifestyle look like? Because if you have noticed over time, you see patterns and trends that come with new advocates or seasoned advocates. And so when I started exploring that, and also around the time that we were reviewing the features of white supremacy within the organization, I realized there was an alignment. New advocates may come with these assumptions or think that this is how we have to conduct advocacy or present ourselves in this movement, when the reality is that really our authentic self? And so the workshop will be a brief overview of the 5 features, which include perfectionism, concentration of power, the right to comfort, individualism, and progress is bigger and more. And we will dive deep into maybe one of those features just to explore and reflect within the workshop. But the goal is really just to build that awareness and see what are some features that we're hanging on to that we need to let go. Because what I realized, the more you hold on to these features of white supremacy, the more likely you're going to get burnt out, or that intensity of the vicarious trauma, feeling that you have to solve all the problems or have all the answers or solutions, when the reality is it's more complex than that. And so with that LEAP program, I took those features and developed a presentation and have implemented it into our Rosebrook Center internal training curriculum. And so I'm happy and excited to share it at the conference.
Wonderful. And how has that implementation gone at Rosebrook's? Just to hear a little bit about that process would be really interesting.
Yeah, so I have held so far 2 internal trainings, and it's been very conversation based. At first, I was like, oh, an hour and a half should be plenty of time for this training. And it's like, nope. Everyone that's participated has provided such great feedback and how important and realization that they've processed throughout that training. And so now I've extended the training to 3 hours because it's just so much information and reflection that's important to touch on, to be aware of who we are as advocates and how we unknowingly may perpetuate some of these features.
I think one of the benefits of coalition work is that we are bringing so much of our experiences in local communities to other organizations throughout the state. And there's so much value there. And I think definitely aligns with our theme of unity. So thank you for just sharing that expertise, Andrea. We're really looking forward to it. And Jessica, we are so excited about your workshop. I think I've been begging you to do it ever since you opened your thrift store. But you very, I think, brilliantly named it Next Stop Thrift Shop. Everything you ever wanted to know about opening and running a thrift shop. Can you tell us about your workshop and what attendees can expect from that?
I feel like it is a huge change of pace from the extremely important topics that Emily and Andrea are covering in their programs. But this is, by popular demand, we are going to come and talk about thrift shops. So I'll just say, first of all, this is my 4th time to present at MOCADSV Conference. So in the last 3 conferences, my shelter director, Kim Dixon, she and I have co-presented. We did one on staff development. We did one on partnerships. And then we did one on our shelter, as Nora already mentioned, how to build a safe and trauma-informed shelter. And so this one's going to be about our thrift shop. So we started a thrift shop in 2006, and we have outgrown our facility twice. And so we're in our 3rd facility now for our thrift shop. And it provides about 30% of our operating income and makes our non-residential services possible. So it's a huge aspect of the work that we do. And the thing about thrift shop revenue is that it is undesignated, and so what you need it for, you can spend it on. And I know that in our work, so much of our funding comes from grants. At any given time, I'm managing 16 plus grants, and so but they're all restricted, or virtually all. And so to be able to have some wiggle room in other areas, especially non-residential services, because there's just not the funding that there is for shelter-based services. So anyway, it's been a great help to our agency. And a thrift shop accomplishes several different things. One, obviously, is financial support, but the other is support for your clients, because our clients are able to go and shop at our thrift store for free. They get a monthly voucher. And when they move out of our shelter into their own safe housing, they get an exit voucher worth more that they can buy items to outfit their home with. And then we also are providing a general community service for families. And we hear a lot from elderly people on a fixed income and those kinds of things, that they appreciate the fact that you can, buy clothing and household items and things that they need at the prices that we offer them. So we're going to cover as many aspects of thrift stores as we can and answer as many questions as we can. But we're going to talk about what is a thrift shop, why would you consider starting one, what considerations you need to at the beginning, and then things you need to have in place before you begin, how to handle donations, sales, and service, how to do merchandising and marketing, because even though it's a thrift shop, you're still trying to get the word out there. You're still trying to make your items as attractive to shoppers as you can. We're going to talk about employees and volunteers. Volunteers play a huge role in a thrift shop, so we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about things you never think about and just try to cover as much as we can so that people feel like, it's something they want to take back to their boards or back to their agency and talk over and see whether they think it might be a good fit for their agency. But it's been a boon to us, and we're happy to share about it. As long as you don't come and open one in Cape Girardeau, we are happy for you to start one in your own community.
Yeah, I have been lucky enough to get to visit your thrift store, and my mind was blown. It is so beautiful. It is beautiful. Can you talk about just the structure of it? I think it's
So we moved into our new facility. I'm in it right now because it's also our outreach office a year ago, exactly last August. And this is an 18,000 square foot facility. About 13,000 feet of that is the thrift store. And we sell women's clothing is far and away our biggest category, but we also sell men's and children's clothing, household items, furniture, and then things like books and toys and electronics and you name it. And so we rely 100% on donations. It is all donated items, and our volunteers sort and price and stock all those things. And then we do have employees who act as cashiers and do some of the heavier work, like stock person type work. And it's really tremendous. I'll tell you, I have a 17-year-old daughter. She and her friends love the thrift store, and it goes, like I said, all the way up, all ages. And women and men love to shop. You just never know what treasures you are going to find there. And we get new items all the time. We had a local bridal shop not too long ago where they retired, and they had a special sale, and then donated all the rest of their bridal inventory to us. So you just never know. So come often. If you see something you like, buy it, because the next time you come, it'll be gone.
Yeah, I have found so many treasures at thrift stores over the years. And I love what you said, Jessica, about how you've integrated this fundraising kind of program into your services by also providing items to survivors who sometimes come to shelter with very few things or leave and need household items.
Yeah. And, same as every shelter, we had a lady a few years ago who came to us in the middle of the night wrapped in a sheet. You've got to be able to supply those folks as quickly as possible. And then the wonderful thing, too, about thrift stores, and also how we try to operate just like our internal food pantry and hygiene closet things, they get to select the items themselves. And, just to have the opportunity to actually shop and not say, well, this is what you have to put on because this is what we have, but what do you like? What do you think looks good on you? You actually get to have those choices. And sometimes you can even get like a designer purse or something, that's been donated here. So it's pretty great.
Can you say one more time about those funds being undesignated? Because I think it's a really important point.
Yeah. So at least for our agency, what we found is that through the various funding streams we have, you can fund a lot of your residential program through grants and things like that. But on the non-residential side, there's just not as much funding. And so thrift store income gives us so much flexibility. And I know, like, for instance, a lot of people, they have trouble, where am I going to put, for instance, my executive director, right? What grant can I put that person on? And some other positions like that. We're able to do that with our thrift store funds because they are not restricted in any way. And so where we have gaps in our funding, we're able to supplement that with thrift store funds. And I think even if your thrift store is smaller or, and newer, or you don't, it's not making, whatever you would like for it to make at first. It is truly an every little bit helps type of a situation. And so, you can really, augment your services or perhaps salaries or whatever the case might be, or even just cover new and ever increasing costs, right? With thrift store revenue. So,
well, I hope that your workshop inspires thrift stores to open throughout the state of Missouri. I can't wait to shop at them.
Yeah. Not to mention that, thrift store shopping is sustainable and good for the environment. So
I just don't see any negatives here.
Win-win every way you look at it.
Absolutely. And then finally, Emily, you're going to be presenting a second session that we're really excited about. It seems very interesting. It's called Breaking Up is Hard to Do, Violence Prevention Through Rejection-Focused Messaging. Can you tell us about that session?
I am always excited to talk about this session. So this session was really kind of born out of a twofold thing. One being working with so many survivors who, yes, they were leaving horrendous, horrible situations, but they were also navigating the end of a relationship that they thought was going to continue forward. And in essence, if we take away, the dynamics of domestic violence that we tease out, they're going through a breakup and are really struggling to kind of make sense of it and figure out what does moving forward look like. It was also kind of born out of my own experiences and just, trying to figure out how to navigate rejection in ways that were healthy. And so this kind of really started kind of coming up in conversations specifically with college students that I was working with. And really a need became identified for specific conversation on rejection. As I learned about the risk and danger that often is present when survivors are leaving relationships, it seemed like a really kind of seamless topic to kind of piece into content that we were already having, which then led into just having conversations just on that topic. And so this session is really going to be about how can we kind of shift some of our content and conversations that we're already having, either from the prevention lens or from the response lens. If we shift it to talk about rejection, does that mean we can actually prevent violence if we're seeing that being the intersection of where a lot of harm happens? And so I want to give a little plug for if you are not an educator, but maybe you are, crisis line worker, shelter worker, know that this session is for you. My hope is that this session will give folks in a variety of different positions some tools and some additional frameworks to be able to support survivors as they're moving forward and hopefully engage in some violence prevention.
Without giving too much away, because no spoilers, but can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between rejection and violence prevention? Like, where does that magic happen?
Absolutely. So if we're going to go a little professor and research about it, a researcher by the name of Dr. Jackie Campbell, many folks in our field may be familiar with her work, really has spent decades, her and her team, looking at cases of intimate partner homicide specifically, and looking at those cases as well as other cases of extreme violence. And what they found, among many different risk factors, is that the end of a relationship, or if a relationship had previously ended and the person was back together, put that person at high risk in that relationship where violence was occurring. And so if we already see kind of that end of a relationship, according to research, as that point where harm is potentially happening, my theory is that if we shift into focusing on really supporting a person through that process, that will lead to violence being prevented. I'm trying to think of what do I want to give away, what I don't want to give away. But know that there is a lot of crossover in some of our verbiage that we are already using in our work. And being able to kind of shift that in a way that sounds like it's more response language, but is really going to be language that we're already using, just shifted a little bit. I hope that answered your question.
For more, you're going to have to take a conference. That's just how it is. Well, that sounds really exciting, Emily. Before we move on, was there anything else that you all wanted to be sure to say about your presentations or the sessions you're going to be presenting specifically? Those were just wonderful little previews, and I can't wait to hear about it. Emily, did you have something?
So I just wanted to highlight, as I was listening to Jessica and Andrea sharing about their sessions, going back to your question, Nora, around what does unity mean to us and how do all these things fit together? I think about each of our sessions, though they may seem a little different in some ways, they're all focused on that goal of unity, whether that is how do we support survivors with very unique needs? How do we support our leadership and advocates in uplifting the voices of those that are most marginalized? Or how do we expand our services each and every one of those perspectives makes us a stronger movement and a stronger collaborative. So I just thought helpful to highlight that.
Thanks for pointing that out. I have to say that we had more workshop proposals for this conference than we've ever had before. There was more than twice as many proposals as we could accommodate. And it was really hard making decisions because when people take time to write a proposal, usually they're really good ideas. And so we really did have to look critically at, well, what kind of aligned with the theme of unity and make some decisions there. And I agree. I think all of yours are really connected to that in interesting ways that are helpful.
Yeah. We're excited because our housing case manager is also coming to do a presentation. And she's going to talk about rapid rehousing, transitional housing, and just generally how to especially work within the continuum of care realm of housing resources. So we're excited for that too. This will be her first time to present at a conference. So it's exciting.
I'm really looking forward to that session too, Jessica, because Robin took this issue of housing and built this program in a way that's making such a positive difference in Cape Girardeau. And I think when people hear about the incredible success she's had, it'll inspire other housing programs to happen in other communities. So I'm really looking forward to that too.
Yep, we're very excited. That's nice of you to say. Thank you.
So one of our key missions here at the Coalition is really rooted in education. So we believe in continuing education, the value of learning from one another, the value of learning from innovative practices happening at the national level, state level, and in local communities. But another one of our key missions is alliance building. And I think there's so much value in the education and the things that we can learn at conference, but there's also a lot of value in the opportunities to make new relationships. You all have spoken to this a little bit, but do you want to speak to what you're looking forward to in terms of alliance building and just getting to network and meet new people at the conference this year?
So I feel alliance building is great because all of our programs go through ups and downs, and maybe we need more creativity or new ideas to function, make it work, help us have that work-life balance. And so what I envision is definitely picking the brains of several participants there, just like, hey, how are you operating this? Or tell me more about this program, to see how we can further enhance our own programs or services here, or maybe there's trends going on that we should really pay attention to in terms of advocacy or self-care, or even logistics like scheduling, like how do you staff a 24-hour program? And so alliances are helpful because, one, we provide that support to one another, but then can also be resourceful when trying to grow or expand or just build resilience within our programs.
Yeah, thanks for speaking to that, Andrea. So the conference happens in mid-Missouri, in Columbia, Missouri, which you all, as members of several boards of the Coalition, are very familiar with mid-Missouri. You come here often. It's a long drive for all of you. No one drives less than 2 hours to get to mid-Missouri who's on this podcast episode. And so do you have any thoughts about the commute, getting there, favorite traditions of driving to mid-Missouri? Or once you're in Missouri, favorite tips or restaurants, shopping experiences, anything about being in mid-Missouri or the trip to mid-Missouri you'd like to speak to?
Well, I think, it's about a 3.5 hour drive for us. So we always rent like a minivan or something so we can all travel together, because I think that that's one of the other great benefits of coming to the conference. If you're able to come with a few people, is you get to, bond with your coworkers in a different way outside of the shelter or the office. And so that's always a lot of fun. And then I have family in Columbia, so I do sort of know like the good places to eat and stuff. So yeah, I think, Columbia is a beautiful city and there really is a lot to do there. In the evenings when you have some free time, you can go downtown and go on to Broadway and see, and just take in the local cuisine and that kind of thing. And then the conference hotel is very conveniently located near the mall. And so you can take that in as well. And then there's also like, a Scooters and a Starbucks just right down the way if you need your coffee fix. So it's a really, I think, a great location for the conference. And Yeah, and then just a real opportunity to spend quality time with your coworkers. Or, the other thing is, if you are on your own, everyone is super friendly, and we've always, taken folks out to eat with us and that kind of thing if they were there at the conference by themselves. So you'll find that that's the case too. You don't need to worry if you're the only one from your agency going.
Yep. Thanks for those tips, Jessica. Anything else you would add to that, Emily or Andrea?
Yeah, I echo like the new relationship building that can happen at the conference. But for me, the drive is more of what my introvert side gets to have fun because, every day it's meeting, supervision, support, advocacy. And then when I go home, I have a family that takes attention and, almost support and advocacy as well in its own ways. But, it's about 2 hours to Columbia, 2.5 to Jefferson City. And I've just learned to catch up on any podcast or webinars I've been wanting to listen to that I don't necessarily have time throughout the day, or catch up on a just audiobook and just let my mind detach from the day-to-day logistics and enjoy a nice cup of coffee on the way there. So I do enjoy like the relationship building piece that happens, but I also equally enjoy some peaceful road time.
100%. I'm so glad you said that, Andrea. And for listeners that haven't caught up with Momentum for Change, there are 3 seasons available to stream or watch on YouTube. So that's one way to spend your drive. Anything you would add, Emily?
Absolutely. So as Andrea said, if you are the introvert, we're going to go back to my previous comment and say, this is the time. If you're like, I want to put myself out there, use your drive or your travel time to do whatever is enjoyable to you. If that looks like engaging in education that you've paused on, it's also okay. If you want to use that time to, if you're like me, listen on repeat to 5 different Taylor Swift albums in a row on the entire drive, that is okay. It's going to be a lot of information that is going to happen at conference. And so if you need that space to just kind of not insert any new information, that is also okay too.
Well, thank you all so much for joining the Momentum for Change podcast today and sharing your thoughts about conference. I cannot wait. It's going to be a fantastic conference this year. As we're closing, was there anything else you wanted to be sure to speak to as far as your sessions or conference?
I was going to say, it's going to be a lot of information that you are going to gain from conference, and you don't have to decide how you're going to incorporate it in your organization at the conference. Like, it is totally okay. As Jessica said, I love this idea of let's divide and kind of conquer, everybody get as much information as possible. It's okay to also get all that information and then say, what we're going to plan for next week to really look over our notes collectively and see what we can apply to our organization. I think there's a lot of passion that happens at conference, which is absolutely fantastic. And that is the purpose of it. But it's okay to also sit with that information for a little bit of time to really, figure out how you want to apply that information to your organization.
Let it seep in.
Yeah, I think that is a really, really good point. And I was just going to say that, from an executive director perspective, I just feel like the conference is very much worth your investment. So I know it can be complicated sometimes to arrange schedules for people to be gone for a few days and coverage and all those kinds of things. And also, as with any conference, there are some costs associated, but it is very, very well worth your investment for your staff. And I think that what we try to do is, we basically keep a list of everyone who's been, make sure that newer people get to go, and we sort of rotate through just to be sure that everyone gets the opportunity to have the conference experience because we really value it that much.
I will also like to add, if the workshop or speakers, if the setting is right, please participate. You think about coming to conference to learn something, but the advocates doing the work every day, whether you're an advocate, coordinator, manager, supervisor, grants, you all have something to contribute. And so that's what I encourage is I encourage your participation, because I know for me as a presenter, I will open-heartedly, arms welcome everything.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all of those just words of wisdom. I really appreciate it. It was great to have you all on the podcast today. And listeners, if you're looking for information about conference, please contact MOCADSV. We would love to see you there. Thank you for joining us. This has been a recorded conversation now available in both video and podcast formats. A video recording of this episode is available on the MOCADSV YouTube channel under the Momentum for Change playlist. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to receive new episodes in your YouTube feed. You can also find all of our Momentum for Change episodes available to stream on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. Momentum for Change is a podcast produced by MOCADSV with post-production support provided by Tim Stillings and promotion by Adrian Maddox. Again, I am your host, Nora Mosby, and we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next month.